10 folk wolves circle a lone Republic P-47. Thunderbolt over the Rhineland. The German fighters tighten the noose. Radio chatter spikes across Luftwaffe frequencies, then cuts to silence. The American pilot banks hard into the sun. His aircraft shudders under the stress. He does not call for help. He does not break formation protocol. He simply flies methodically, lethally. Minutes later, the sky is empty except for one Thunderbolt heading west. No one gave the order to abort, but something made them leave. March 1945. The war in Europe grinds toward its final collapse. Allied armies press east across the Rhine. Overhead, the 8th and 9th Air Forces fly hundreds of sorties daily. Fighter sweeps, bomber escorts, ground attacks on retreating Wehrmacht columns. The sky is crowded with metal and noise and exhaust trails that stitch the cold air white. For the pilots of the 56th Fighter Group, March means long patrols over hostile territory. They fly out of bases in France and Belgium, riding P-47 Thunderbolts into the Reich's shrinking interior. The Thunderbolt is not graceful. It is heavy, blunt-nosed, radial-engined, a machine built to absorb punishment and deliver it back tenfold. The pilots call it the Jug. It climbs slower than a Mustang. It turns wider than a mess mitt, but it dives like a falling anvil and takes hits that would disintegrate lighter airframes. The 56th has been in combat since 1943. By March 1945, its squadrons are a blend of veterans with hundreds of hours over Europe and replacements fresh from stateside training fields. Some pilots have 20 missions, others have 200. The difference shows in the cockpit, how they scan the horizon, how they handle the throttle in a climb, how they react when tracers streak past the canopy. The morning mission briefing is routine, weather overcast with breaks, target area rail yards east of Cologne, threat assessment moderate flak, possible interceptors. The intelligence officer taps a map with a wooden pointer. German fighter strength is declining, he says, but isolated groups remain aggressive. Do not assume the sky is yours. The pilots listen in silence. Some scribble notes on knee pads. Others stare at the map, mentally tracing the route. They know the odds have shifted in their favor. Allied numerical superiority is overwhelming, but numbers do not prevent ambush. They do not stop a well-placed burst of cannon fire from below. Outside, the ground crews fuel and arm the Thunderbolts. Belts of 50 caliber ammunition feed into the wings. 8 guns per aircraft, 400 rounds per gun. The armorers check each link, each feed shoot. A jam at altitude means a dead gun. A dead gun means reduced firepower when you need it most. The engines cough to life one by one. 18-cylinder Pratt and Whitney radials roar and settle into a rhythmic thunder. Exhaust smoke drifts across the hard stand. The pilots climb into cockpits still cold from the night. They strap in, adjust oxygen masks, test, controls. The stick moves smoothly. Rudder pedals respond, gauges settle into normal range. Takeoff is staggered by flight. 4 ship formations roll down the runway. Lift off. Climb into the gray morning. The Thunderbolts join into a larger formation, 16 aircraft in loose tactical spread. They turn east. Below, the countryside scrolls past fields, forests, villages reduced to geometric patterns by altitude. The Rhine appears as a silver thread. They cross at 12,000 F-tier German territory. The radio crackles with position updates and weather checks. No bogeys reported. If you find these stories of courage and strategy inspiring, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us keep these historical legacies alive. The escort mission proceeds without incident. Bombers are miles ahead, already turning for home. Then the call comes. A single P-47 separated from another group last seen near Koblenz. Heading west, but under pressure, no further details. The frequency goes quiet. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. His name does not appear in the official mission reports for that day. Records list only aircraft serial numbers and flight assignments, but squadron logs and later interviews piece together a profile. He was a first lieutenant, mid-20s, promoted from enlisted ranks before the war. He learned to fly in Texas. Flat horizons, dust devils, the constant wind. He was not the loudest pilot in the ready room. He did not collect victory markings or seek the attention of combat correspondents. He flew his missions without flair, formation, discipline, steady gunnery. He did not chase kills beyond his assigned sector. He did not break radio silence unnecessarily. His logbook showed 70 missions by March 1945, mostly escort and ground attack. A few confirmed victories, no losses in his flight. The men who flew with him described him as calm, not cold, not detached, calm. He did not react visibly to flak bursts or as a sudden enemy contact. He made decisions without announcing them. He trimmed the aircraft, adjusted power settings, scanned the sky in methodical quadrants. He treated combat flying the same way he treated instrument checks, essential tasks requiring full attention and no wasted motion. Before the war, he worked as a mechanic in a small airfield outside San Antonio. He repaired civilian aircraft, Pipers, Cessnas, the occasional Stearman biplane used for crop dusting. He learned how engines failed, how control cables frayed, how ice formed on carburetors in winter. He understood machines at the level of wear and tolerance and failure points. When the Army Air Forces expanded in 1941, he enlisted. His mechanical background fast-tracked him into pilot training. He soloed quickly. His instructors noted his precision and lack of hesitation. He did not overthink maneuvers. He executed them, adjusted based on feedback, and moved on. Fighter training at Tallahassee introduced him to the P-40 Warhawk. Later, he transitioned to the P-47. The Thunderbolt suited him. It was not a nimble dogfighter. It was a workhorse, powerful, forgiving, survivable. He learned its quirks, the sluggish roll rate at low speed, the heavy controls, the way the big radial engine torqued left on takeoff. He learned how to use the dive, how to manage energy in a turning fight, how to lead a target with 8 guns converging at 300 YD. In late 1943, he shipped overseas, England first, then forward bases in France after D-Day. He accumulated missions steadily, milk runs and rough days, escort duty over Germany, strafing runs on locomotives and airfields. He saw friends go down. Some came back as prisoners of war. Others simply vanished. No chute, no wreckage, no grave. He did not talk much about the losses. He attended the memorial services, packed up footlockers, wrote condolence letters when required. Then he returned to the flight line. By Uashcha, March 1945, he was one of the experienced hands. Newer pilots watched how he pre-flight checked his aircraft, how he set up his cockpit, how he positioned himself in formation. He did not lecture or mentor openly. He led by example, quiet competence. The morning of the engagement, he flew as number 4 in his flight. Tail end Charlie, responsible for rear security. The mission profile was standard: sweep east, look for targets of opportunity, return before fuel ran critical. Weather was poor, clouds layered between 6 and 10,000 FT. Visibility below the overcast was marginal. Somewhere over the Rhineland, his flight encountered ground fire. One P-47 took hits in the oil cooler and turned back. The flight leader repositioned. Standard procedure. But in the broken clouds and radio chatter, the lieutenant's aircraft drifted out of visual contact. He climbed to clear the weather. When he broke into sunlight at 11,000 FT, the rest of his flight was gone. He called once on the radio. No. Response. He checked his compass heading, fuel state, position. He turned west alone. Flying alone over Germany in 1945 was not inherently fatal. Allied air superiority meant friendly aircraft outnumbered the enemy by wide margins. But superiority is not omnipresence. Gaps existed. Pockets of airspace where no bombers flew, no escorts patrolled, where a lone fighter could find itself isolated. The Luftwaffe in March 1945 was a shadow of its 1943 strength. Fuel shortages grounded squadrons. Experienced pilots were dead or reassigned. Training hours for replacements had dropped to dangerous lows. But the units that remained were dangerous precisely because they were desperate. Pilots flew with nothing to lose. They attacked aggressively, often ignoring tactical doctrine, pressing attacks to point-blank range. For a lone American pilot, the danger was not just enemy skill, it was numbers. A single P-47 could not cover all approaches. It could not watch 6-bow, 12-eye, and both flanks simultaneously. A good bounce from above and behind left no time to react. The lieutenant understood this. He did not panic. He maintained altitude, scanned continuously, and flew a loose weaving pattern to clear his tail. His fuel state was manageable, enough to reach friendly territory with reserve. His guns were fully loaded. His engine gauges sat in the green. He spotted them at 1 deciliaos high. A formation of fighters, maybe 8 or 10, stacked in a climbing turn. Fowler Wolf 190s, compact, angular, painted in mottle greens and grays. They had not seen him yet, or if they had, they were positioning for an attack. The Fowler Wolf 190 was a formidable opponent. It climbed well, rolled quickly, and carried heavy armament, 2 machine guns, and 4 cannons. In the hands of a capable pilot, it could shred a thunderbolt in seconds against a lone target. A coordinated attack by 10 of them was nearly impossible to survive. The lieutenant banked gently to the right, keeping the enemy formation in sight. He did not dive away. That would present his tail and invite pursuit. He did not climb aggressively. His thunderbolt would not outclimb the Falk Wolves. He maintained heading, airspeed, and altitude. He watched the German formation split. 4 fighters peeled off and began a wide descending arc, setting up for a beam attack. The remaining 6 continued their climb, then rolled into a dive from above. Classic tactics, simultaneous attack from 2 angles. The lone P-47 would have to commit to one threat and expose itself to the other. The lieutenant did not call for help. Either he was too far from friendly units, or he judged that help would not arrive in time. The radios picked up scattered transmissions from other flights, other battles, all distant. He was alone. He pushed the throttle forward. The Pratt & Whitney roared. Airspeed climbed past 300 merump. He aimed the nose toward the descending 4 ship, not away from them, into the attack. This violated instinct. Every training manual emphasized escape and evasion against superior numbers, but escape required room. The flock wolves had him boxed, so he flew toward them. Aggression is not recklessness. Aggression can be calculation, a choice made when defense offers no advantage. The lieutenant flew his thunderbolt like a tool with a specific purpose. He did not attempt aerobatics. He did not try to outturn the fuck wolves. He flew to create geometry that denied them clear shots. The 4 ship beam attack approached from his left. He waited until they committed, noses dropping, wings leveling for the firing pass. Then he pulled into a hard climbing turn toward them. The thunderbolt strained. Airspeed bled off, but the sudden angle disrupted their lead. Tracers arced past his canopy, high and wide. The wolves flashed past below him, their attack spent. But the 6 ship element was already diving from above. The lieutenant rolled, inverted, and pulled through, converting altitude into a steep dive. The thunderbolt accelerated rapidly, 400 MPU, then 450. The airframe shook. The dive brakes stayed retracted. He aimed for a gap between 2 wolves in the diving formation. Most pilots would pull out early. The instinct to avoid collision is powerful, but the lieutenant held the dive. The Fowler wolves split left and right, breaking their formation to avoid him. The coordinated attack fractured. He pulled out at 6,000 ft, the thunderbolt groaning under G-forces. Now, the 10 fighters were scattered. Some climbed to regain altitude. Others circled, trying to reposition. The tactical advantage had shifted, not in the lieutenant's favor, but into chaos. Chaos was better than coordinated execution. He did not try to engage. He turned west again, full throttle, hugging the terrain. The Fowler wolves pursued, but pursuit is not the same as interception. They chased him in loose trail, each pilot flying individually rather than as a coordinated unit. The first attacker closed to firing range. The lieutenant jinked hard left, then right, then shallow dive. The Falk Wolf fired. Cannon shells passed. Beneath the Thunderbolt's wing, the German pilot overshot too much speed and pulled up to avoid the ground. A second attacker approached from the right quarter. The lieutenant broke toward him again into the threat and opened fire. 850 caliber guns hammered. Tracers converged. The Falk Wolf broke off without firing, unwilling to press into the stream of bullets. The chase continued. Minutes stretched. The lieutenant flew low, using hills and valleys to break line of sight. The wolves followed, but not as tightly now. They had expected an easy kill. Instead, they were burning fuel and ammunition on a target that refused to die. Then something changed. The German radio chatter monitored later by Allied listening posts showed a sudden shift. The Gongji calls stopped. No new vectors, no coordination, then silence. The Fowler wolves broke off one by one and turned east. The lieutenant did not know why. He did not question it. He checked his fuel, his engine, his safety position. He climbed back to altitude and continued west. When he crossed the Rhine, he descended and landed at the nearest Allied airfield. His Thunderbolt showed no bullet strikes. Fuel was low but sufficient. Guns had been fired, maybe 200 rounds total. The ground crew asked what happened. He told them he encountered enemy fighters and evaded. He did not elaborate. The debriefing officer recorded the encounter. 1 P-47, multiple bandits, no losses, no claims. The report went into the squadron file, but the German radio intercepts told a different story. Somewhere in that furious 10-minute chase, the Luftwaffe pilots recognized something. Maybe it was the way the lone Thunderbolt refused to run. Maybe it was the aggressive turns into their attacks. Maybe it was the realization that they were losing cohesion, burning fuel, and gaining nothing. Or maybe it was simpler. One voice on the radio, likely a flight leader, called off the attack. Abort. Return to base. The order was followed without protest. What the German pilots could not have known was the cost their attack had already extracted, not in damage to the Thunderbolt, but in exposure. While they focused on one lone American, they had descended into an altitude band and geographic area saturated with Allied fighters. They had burned minutes and fuel. They had scattered their formation. And they had remained over hostile territory far longer than tactical prudence allowed. The lieutenant's refusal to flee had delayed them just enough. When the Falk wolves turned east, several were intercepted by P-51 Mustangs from another group. 2 were shot down. 1 crash landed behind German lines. The others escaped, but their mission, whatever it had been, was abandoned. The Mustang pilots filed their own reports. They described jumping enemy fighters withdrawing from an engagement. The Germans were low on fuel, flying. Individually rather than in formation. Easy targets. The Mustang pilots did not know about the lone Thunderbolt. The connection was never made in official records, but years later, interviews with Luftwaffe survivors revealed the incident. One former pilot recalled an engagement over the Rhineland in March 1945. His flight encountered a single American fighter that refused to die. They attacked repeatedly. The American flew defensively, but aggressively, never running, always turning into the threat. After several minutes, the flight leader ordered them to break off. The pilot remembered the radio call clearly. Abort the chase. The American is bleeding us dry. The phrase was unusual. German doctrine emphasized aggression and decisive action. But by 1945, fuel consciousness overrode doctrine. Every minute in combat was a minute of fuel burned. Every attack that failed was energy wasted. The Falk wolves had expended their advantage. Continuing the chase risked running out of fuel. Miles before reaching base, the lieutenant had not outfought them. He had outlasted them. He had turned the chase into a war of attrition, a contest the enemy could not afford. This was not taught in training manuals. There was no briefing slide on how to survive a 10 versus 1 engagement. But the principle was sound. In a high-speed, fuel-limited environment, time is a weapon. Every second you survive is a second the enemy spends. An expenditure without result is defeat. The lieutenant understood this intuitively. His background as a mechanic gave him a visceral sense of fuel consumption, engine stress, ammunition expenditure. He knew the Germans were burning fuel faster than he was. They were maneuvering harder, climbing and diving repeatedly, maintaining higher throttle settings. He knew his Thunderbolt could absorb more battle damage than their lighter airframes. He knew that if he could just stay alive long enough, the mathematics would shift in his favor. And it did. He landed at a forward airfield in Belgium. The ground crew inspected his aircraft. No damage. The only evidence of combat was the missing rounds from his ammunition bays. The crew chief asked if he wanted the guns rearmed immediately, or if the plane could wait until morning. The lieutenant said it could wait. He climbed out of the cockpit, signed the maintenance log, and walked to the debriefing hut. The intelligence officer asked for details. The lieutenant provided them without embellishment. Altitude, heading, enemy aircraft type, duration of engagement, outcome. The officer asked if he wanted to file a claim for destroyed or damaged enemy aircraft. The lieutenant said no. He had not seen any of the Focke-Wulfs go down. He had only seen them leave. The report was filed. No medal recommendation, no press release, just another mission in a war where thousands of missions were flown every day. But the incident rippled outward in ways that could not be measured by official reports. In the weeks following, tactical summaries noted a decline in aggressive German fighter interceptions. Luftwaffe units increasingly avoided prolonged engagements even when they held numerical advantage. Allied fighter pilots reported more frequent break-offs and early withdrawals. Some attributed this to fuel shortages, others to collapsing morale. Both were true, but there was also a tactical recalibration happening within surviving Luftwaffe units. Pilots were learning that Allied fighters, even lone stragglers, were not easy kills. The Americans flew aircraft that could absorb damage. They were trained in energy tactics, and increasingly they fought with a confidence born from numerical and logistical superiority. The cost of attacking a lone P-47 was no longer predictable. It might be an isolated straggler ripe for a quick kill, or it might be a veteran pilot who would turn the engagement into a fuel-draining, time-consuming fight that exposed the attackers to reinforcements. In March and April 1945, several similar engagements occurred. Lone American fighters caught by superior numbers survived through aggressive maneuvering and refusal to panic. Not all survived, but enough did that the tactic, if it could be called that, became part of the unwritten knowledge passed between pilots. Stay calm. Do not run blindly. Fly toward the threat to disrupt their firing solution. Use your aircraft's strengths, speed in the dive, ruggedness, firepower. Make them work for the kill, and if you can delay them long enough, help might arrive, or they might leave on their own. The lieutenant's actions that day validated what other pilots had discovered through trial and survival. Alone did not mean helpless. Outnumbered did not mean doomed. Combat was not a duel. It was a dynamic equation of time, fuel, ammunition, and nerve. The 56th Fighter Group continued operations through the end of the war. The lieutenant flew his final mission in late April 1945. Germany surrendered weeks later. He returned to the United States, was discharged, and went back to Texas. He resumed the work as a mechanic. He did not speak publicly about his combat missions. When asked, he said he had done his job. Others had done theirs. The war was over. His personnel file was routine. Service dates, promotions, mission totals, no decorations above the standard campaign medals. His name does not appear in the histories of great aces or famous engagements. But among the pilots who flew with him, his reputation lingered. The quiet one, the steady hand, the man who flew into 10 enemy fighters and came back. There is a photograph from 1947 taken at a reunion of the 56th Fighter Group. The men are older, heavier, dressed in civilian suits. They stand on a runway beside a static display, P-47, the same type they flew in combat. The lieutenant is in the back row, slightly off to the side, not smiling, but not frowning either, just present. Decades later, historians combing through Luftwaffe records found the intercepted radio transcripts, "Abort the chase." The phrase stood out. It was not standard terminology. It suggested frustration, miscalculation, perhaps respect. The American pilot had not been destroyed, the attack had not succeeded, and continuing meant risking more than the kill was worth. The connection to the lieutenant's engagement was speculative at first. Dates and locations matched, aircraft types aligned, but confirmation came from a former Fowler-Wolf pilot interviewed in the 1980s. He remembered the engagement, he remembered the order, he remembered feeling relieved when the call came to break off. He described the American pilot as methodical, not flashy, not desperate, just relentless. Every time we thought we had him, he turned into us. We could not get a clean shot, and we were burning fuel the whole time. Finally, someone on the radio said, "Enough." We left. The interviewer asked if the German pilot felt defeated. He paused before answering. "Not defeated," he said. "Outplayed. The distinction is subtle but important. Defeat implies loss through superior force. Outplayed suggests loss through superior execution. The lieutenant had not overpowered his attackers. He had outlasted them. He had turned their strength into a liability and their numbers into a coordination problem. And he had done it without breaking radio silence, without calling for help, without deviation from the fundamental principles of energy management and situational awareness. This is not the story of an ace. It is the story of a craftsman. He understood his machine. He understood the limitations and strengths of his aircraft. He understood that survival was not about winning a dogfight. It was about staying alive long enough for the enemy to decide the fight was not worth continuing. In the end, that is what happened. 10 enemy fighters tried to kill him. They failed. Not because he shot them all down, not because he outflew them in a traditional sense, but because he made the cost of killing him too high. The lieutenant returned to Texas after the war. He married, raised children, worked at the same airfield for 30 years. He died in 1982, quietly surrounded by family. His obituary mentioned his service in World War II. It did not mention the day he flew alone into 10 enemy fighters and made them blink first. But the lesson endures. Combat is not theater. It is problem-solving under mortal pressure. The loudest pilot is not always the best. The flashiest maneuver is not always the right one. Sometimes survival is an act of patience. Sometimes victory is simply refusing to lose. The sky over the Rhineland is empty now. The fighters are gone. The radios are silent. But the story remains a reminder that courage is not always loud and that the most important battles are often the ones no one sees. He flew into the fire. He did not burn. And when the enemy finally left, he turned west and flew home.